1816, Yorkshire, England. The first snow of December fell over Yorkshire like a soft sigh, covering the frozen moors, the skeletal trees, and the vast grey stone of Ravensworth Manor. The estate loomed in solemn silence, its candlelit windows glimmering faintly through the fog. Inside, the grand halls still bore the echo of laughter that once filled them, though it had been years since anyone dared to speak of joy within these walls. The Duke of Winthorpe had returned home at last, from the war, from exile, from grief. But those who saw him said he brought the ghosts of battle with him. He did not attend London balls anymore. He did not host hunts, nor entertain callers. He lived quietly, with too many letters unopened, too many rooms locked, and too many memories that would not die. That was the house lady. Amelia Greystone entered on a cold, wind-bitten morning. Her carriage wheels cut through the snow like whispers through a secret. Wrapped in a faded gray cloak, she stepped down at the manor steps, her gloved fingers trembling slightly. From the cold or from fear, she could not tell. It had been years since she had been among such grandeur. Years since society had smiled at her. Years since her secret, the one that made her an outcast, had turned her name into a quiet scandal. The Duchess of Winthorpe, her distant cousin, had sent a letter weeks ago. "You are welcome to Ravensworth for the winter. Dear Amelia, my brother could use gentle company, though he would never admit it." Amelia had accepted, though she did not know why. Perhaps because she had nowhere else to go, or perhaps because something in those words, gentle company, sounded like mercy. When she entered the manor, the great doors closed behind her, with a sound like thunder. Servants bowed, offered to take her cloak. Fires burned in the hearths, but the warmth did not reach the air. Every hallway was lined with portraits, proud ancestors with steel eyes and regal posture. But it was the silence that unsettled her most. It was not the silence of peace, but the kind that follows after something breaks. That evening, after dinner, she wandered from the guest chambers, unable to sleep. The corridors were dim, the house creaking with the weight of memory. She carried a single candle and turned toward the library, drawn by the faint scent of burning wood and the whisper of pages turning. And there, by the firelight, she saw him, the Duke of Winthorpe. He was not the man she remembered from London years ago, the one whose name had once drawn admiration and envy. Time and loss had carved him into something quieter, darker. His hair, once raven black, was streaked with gray at the temples. His jaw carried the faintest scar, a memory from the battlefield. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment, neither spoke. "Forgive me, Your Grace," she began, lowering her gaze. "I did not mean to intrude." He regarded her calmly, his voice low, quiet as the fire itself. "You're not intruding, Lady Amelia. Few people have dared enter this room since I returned." "I can see why," she replied softly, stepping forward. "It feels haunted." A faint smile touched his lips, the kind that flickers and vanishes before it can become real. "Yes, haunted is the right word." She hesitated. "Do you believe in ghosts, Your Grace?" He turned toward the fire, eyes distant. "Only the ones that live inside us." Her heart gave a small, inexplicable ache. She did not know what to say, so she said nothing. She simply crossed the room, placed her candle upon the nearest table, and sat across from him. He watched her, curious but not unkind. "You are not afraid." "Of what?" she asked. "Of silence," he said. "Most people are." She looked into the fire, and for a moment, something fragile passed between them. A recognition. Two souls who had both lost something irreplaceable, though neither spoke of it. "No," she whispered. "I think silence can be merciful." They sat for what felt like hours saying nothing, listening to the crackle of the logs, the occasional sigh of wind against the windows. When at last she rose to leave, he stood as well, his manners instinctive, despite the years of solitude. "Good night, Your Grace," she said softly, gathering her candle. "Good night, Lady Amelia." He paused, his eyes lingering on her face. "I hope the ghosts will be kind to you tonight." "And to you," she replied. She walked away, her footsteps fading into the hall, and the Duke, left alone once more, stared into the fire. For the first time in years, the silence did not feel heavy, it felt shared. That night, Amelia lay awake, watching the snow fall against her window, and wondered why the Duke's voice still lingered in her thoughts. Perhaps it was the way he had looked at her, not as though she was broken, but as though he was, too. And somewhere down the corridor, the Duke of Winthorpe stared into the flames, remembering the softness in her eyes, the steadiness in her tone. He whispered to the empty room, "Strange, I almost felt alive again." The morning after that haunting conversation, the Duke of Ravenshade sat in his study, a room filled with sunlight, but wrapped in silence. The scent of pine from the burning hearth mingled with the faint trace of parchment and ink. He was a man known for commanding presence, a war hero whose valor had been sung across the English countryside. Yet in that moment, he looked less like a victor and more like a man quietly at war with himself. His fingers toyed with the edge of a sealed letter. Her letter, the one in which she had written, "I cannot give you an heir." Those words had echoed in his mind like a curse. Not because he desired heirs, but because she thought he desired them more than her. He rose abruptly, pacing the floor with the tension of a man trapped in duty. For years, his life had been defined by the demands of title and tradition, the estate, the lineage, the endless whispers of society about the Duke who must wed for the future of his house. But she, Lady Alara Whitmore, had changed everything. She had entered his life, not as a delicate flower to be admired, but as a storm that stripped away all pretense. He remembered their first meeting, at a summer ball beneath glittering chandeliers. She had worn no jewels, no silks that dazzled, just a gown of soft blue, modest yet arresting, and eyes that had held both sorrow and defiance. She had not smiled, not bowed, not even looked twice when he had approached her. And that was precisely why he could not forget her. Now, as he stared into the flames, he could hear her voice again. "You need an heir, Your Grace. I cannot give you one." And he had replied then, almost in disbelief, "Then you shall give me peace." But could he? Could any man who carried centuries of expectation in his blood truly choose peace over legacy? He ran a hand through his dark hair and reached for the bell. "Summon my horse," he ordered the butler. "I'm riding to Whitmore Hall." The butler hesitated. "Now, Your Grace, it's barely dawn." "Now," the Duke said firmly, his voice brooking. No question, Whitmore Hall stood like a forgotten jewel on the edge of the moors, quiet, lovely, and distant from the glittering cruelty of London society. Alara had retreated there weeks ago, under the pretext of poor health. Though the Duke knew better, she was not ill. She was afraid, not of him, but of herself, of the weight her barren truth carried. When his carriage arrived, the servants scattered like startled doves. No one dared approach until the Duke himself strode to the front door, and knocked once, sharply. Moments later, Alara appeared, her auburn hair loosely braided, a shawl wrapped around her pale shoulders. The sight of him there, tall, severe, eyes shadowed with emotion, nearly stole her breath. "Your Grace," she whispered, her voice trembling, "why have you come?" He removed his glove slowly, deliberately. "Because I am tired of letting silence speak for us." Her lips parted, unsure whether to let him in. "There is nothing left to say." "There is everything left to say," he countered, stepping closer until the faint warmth of his breath reached her skin. "You think I care for heirs and legacies, Alara, that I would trade your heart for a name carved on a family crest." Tears shimmered in her eyes, unfallen. "But your title, your family, be damned to my title," he said softly, his voice breaking with sincerity. "You speak of heirs as though they are the measure of love. Yet what is a house without peace? What is a legacy without joy?" Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorframe to steady herself. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," his tone gentled. "You have been hurt by a world that values women for their wombs and men for their power. But I am not that world, Alara. I am merely a man asking for peace beside you." For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the wind whispered through the heather fields, carrying the scent of rain and forgotten promises. At last, she stepped aside, allowing him entry. "Then come in, Your Grace," she murmured. "If you still mean those words, come and prove them." And as he crossed the threshold of Whitmore Hall, a new chapter began, one not written by duty or lineage, but by the fragile, defiant hope that love might still conquer legacy. The whispers began long before the Duke and Lady Alara entered the ballroom. London society had always been cruel, but that night, it was merciless. It was the annual winter gala at the Marchioness of Bexley's estate, a grand event that dripped with gold and gossip. Every chandelier seemed to glitter with secrets, every lady's fan fluttered like a weapon, and when word spread that the Duke of Ravensshade would be attending with the reclusive Lady Ilara Whitmore, the woman whispered to be unfit for marriage. The ballroom became a theater of whispers. The Duke entered first. His tall frame drew the kind of attention reserved for legends. He was dressed in black, the color of power, of rebellion. The crowd parted, but not out of respect, out of curiosity. Then she followed. Ilara, her gown was ivory silk, soft and unadorned. A single strand of pearls rested at her throat. She looked neither like a debutante nor a duchess. She looked real. Her quiet grace stole the air from the room, and for one brief moment, even the cruelest tongues forgot to move. But then came the first whisper, sharp as a blade. She cannot give him an heir. Poor Duke, such a shame for the Ravensshade line. Perhaps he intends to keep her as a mistress instead. The words slithered through the air like venom. Ilara heard them. She always did, but this time, she did not falter. Her chin lifted slightly, and her eyes sought him, the Duke, across the marble floor. He met her gaze, and in that brief glance, a silent vow passed between them. Let them talk. The orchestra began to play, a slow waltz, haunting and romantic. He crossed the room, every step deliberate, the crowd watching, as though a scandal were about to unfold before their eyes. When he reached her, he extended his hand. "May I have this dance, my lady?" Her heart stumbled, but her voice remained steady. "If you wish to be the subject of every headline tomorrow, then yes." He smiled faintly. "I was born for scandal." Their hands met, and as they moved onto the dance floor, silence rippled outward. The music swelled, violins and cellos, weaving a melody so beautiful that it almost drowned out the whispers. Almost every turn, every step was defiance. A slow, graceful rebellion. The Duke's hand rested on the small of her back with unspoken protection. His gaze never left hers. To the world, they were dancing, but to each other, they were declaring war, not against people, but against expectation itself. Lady Bexley, fanning herself near the corner, muttered, "Shameless." Her companion replied dryly, "No, my dear, that's what courage looks like." When the music faded, applause broke out, hesitant at first, then stronger. The Duke bowed slightly, his hand still holding hers. "See," he murmured under his breath, "no ghosts, no legacy, no judgment can touch us if we choose not to let them." She smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened. "For now," she whispered, "but peace, my Duke, never lasts long in London." And she was right. Because before the evening was done, a letter arrived at the Duke's townhouse, sealed with the Ravensshade crest and the handwriting of his aunt, the Dowager Duchess herself. It read, "Your behavior tonight has shamed the Ravensshade name. If you continue your association with Lady Whitmore, you shall not only lose your title, but the estate that bears it. Think carefully, my dear nephew. Love is fleeting, but blood is forever." The letter burned in his hand as he read it, his jaw tightening. The world was moving to tear them apart once more. But this time, he would not surrender. The morning after the winter gala, the sky above London was thick with grey, a color that matched the heaviness in the Duke's chest. He stood by the window of Ravensshade House, holding the Dowager Duchess's letter in one hand and an untouched cup of tea in the other. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, the only sound in a room that once symbolized power, but now felt like a gilded cage. He had been summoned, and no man, not even the Duke of Ravensshade, ignored a summons from the Dowager Duchess, his aunt, his mentor, and, in many ways, his keeper. When he arrived at Ravensshade Manor, the ancestral seat, the air was colder. The portraits of past dukes glared down at him as he passed, their painted eyes heavy with judgment. He entered the drawing room, and there she was, the Dowager Duchess, sitting as if carved from marble, her posture perfect, her presence commanding. "Sebastian," she said coolly, not looking up from her embroidery, "I assume you've come to your senses." He exhaled slowly. "If by senses you mean that I've realized love is worth more than the weight of a family name, then yes, entirely. It weakens bloodlines, it clouds judgment, and it destroys legacy." You are the last of the Ravenshades. Your duty is not to feel but to continue. He took a step forward, the floor creaking beneath his boots. And if that duty demands I destroy the one person who has ever given me peace? Her voice did not waver. Then you must decide what you value more, peace or permanence. The silence that followed was suffocating. He stared at the woman who had raised him after his parents' deaths, the woman who taught him how to command rooms, how to maintain dignity, even in despair. And yet, standing there, he saw not his aunt, but the echo of centuries of cruelty disguised as tradition. I won't end it, he said quietly. Not for you, not for the title. Her lips curved into something between pity and fury. Then you are not the Duke I raised. You are a fool, chasing a barren dream. The words struck like a slap, but he didn't flinch. When he finally left the manor, the sky had begun to drizzle, soft, mournful rain. He mounted his horse and rode through the muddy countryside, his thoughts a storm of anger and devotion. Back in the city, Lady Alara sat by the window of her modest townhouse, sketching in her journal. It was a habit she had taken up during her years of seclusion, drawing dreams she could never live. When the knock came, she looked up, startled. The Duke entered without waiting for invitation. He looked tired, wet from the rain, but there was a quiet fire in his eyes. You shouldn't be here, she whispered, standing. Your family will. My family, he interrupted, is the reason I came. He took her hands cold, trembling, and pressed them against his chest. They gave me an ultimatum, Alara. The title or you. Her breath caught. Sebastian. No, I chose you. For a moment, time stopped. Her eyes filled with disbelief, then pain. You can't throw away your birthright for me. I have nothing to offer you, I can't. He silenced her by placing a finger against her lips. You've given me something no title ever could, peace. You said you couldn't give me an heir. Then give me that peace, Alara. Stay. That's all I'll ever ask. She looked at him as if trying to memorize every word, every heartbeat. The weight of his sacrifice pressed down on her, like a crown she did not deserve. Tears slipped down her cheeks. If you do this, she whispered, there will be no turning back. He smiled faintly, his thumb brushing her tears away. Then let the world end, my love. I've already found my forever. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, a storm gathering, both in the heavens and within the walls of Ravenshade. Because by dawn, word would spread across London. The Duke of Ravenshade has defied the Dowager Duchess. He has chosen a woman who cannot bear him an heir. And for the first time in centuries, love has conquered lineage. But not everyone celebrated. For someone, hidden in the shadows of that very city, had been waiting for this rebellion. And their plan was only just beginning. Rain still clung to the cobblestones of Mayfair the next morning, as though the heavens themselves could not decide whether to cleanse the city of its sins or drown it in them. By dawn, the scandal had spread like wildfire. Every drawing room, every tea room, every gossip column whispered of the same shocking truth. The Duke of Ravenshade had forsaken his title for a woman who could not give him an heir. The Morning Gazette called it the most unforgivable folly of the season. The Times wrote of a love doomed by biology. And behind every teacup, society smirked. But within the walls of Alara's townhouse, the world was still. The Duke sat by the window, his cravat undone, staring into the gray morning, as though expecting the world to knock at the door and demand an explanation. Alara stood at the hearth, clutching a letter, one that had arrived moments earlier, bearing no seal but written in a hand she recognized instantly. It was her brother's. Alara, leave him, for your sake and his. The Ravenshades will not forgive this. You think love will protect you, but London devours women like you. Come home before it's too late. Edmund, her fingers trembled as she folded the letter. Edmund had always been her protector, stern but kind. Yet she knew he was right. Love in their world was not a sanctuary. It was a scandal waiting to be weaponized. The Duke turned to her, sensing her silence. Another letter? She hesitated, then handed it to him. From Edmund. He warns me to leave you. He read it quietly, his jaw tightening. Then, without a word, he tossed it into the fire. The parchment curled, darkened, and vanished into flame. Alara, he said softly. I have fought in Parliament, on battlefields, and in boardrooms filled with vipers. None of them frighten me half as much as the thought of losing you. Her breath caught. Sebastian, I will not live in a world dictated by men who mistake cruelty for honor. Let them whisper. Let them write their headlines. I have you, and that is all I will ever need. For the first time in years, she smiled, not with joy, but with aching relief. But their peace was not to last. Later that evening, as the Duke prepared to leave for a discreet meeting with his solicitor, to formally renounce certain titles and estates, Elara noticed something strange, a shadow outside the townhouse. Not moving watching, she pulled the curtain slightly, her heartbeat quickening. The figure stood tall beneath a street lamp, his coat dark, his hat low. When their eyes met, or so she thought, the man vanished into the fog. When Sebastian returned, an hour later, drenched from rain, she told him. There was someone outside, she whispered, watching the house. He frowned, instantly alert. A spy, perhaps. My aunt has ways of gathering her information. But this felt different, Elara insisted. There was something cold in his stare, as if he wasn't here for gossip, but for revenge. The Duke placed a hand on her shoulder. You're safe here. No one will touch you. Yet that night, when the house fell silent, and the embers in the fireplace died, a faint noise echoed from the back alley. A metallic scrape, deliberate and slow. In the darkness, a shadow moved near the window, leaving behind a folded note pressed against the glass. When dawn came, the servants found it. The Duke read it in silence, his blood turning cold. You took from me what was promised by blood. You think love can save you, Ravenshade. Then watch how easily I destroy it. No name, no seal, only a single symbol drawn at the bottom. A raven pierced by a dagger. The Duke's hand tightened around the note until it crumpled. So it begins, he murmured. Elara stepped closer, her voice trembling. Who would send such a thing? He looked at her with an expression she had never seen before, a mix of sorrow and fury. Someone I thought long dead, he whispered. My brother. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, but the warmth could not reach the chill that spread through the room. After those words, Elara stood frozen, her eyes wide. Your brother, she whispered. Sebastian, I thought you said. I did, the Duke said quietly, his voice low and heavy. Because I believed it, because I saw him die. He sank into the armchair beside the window, elbows resting on his knees, his face half lit by the orange glow of the flames. My brother, Alistair, was the true heir to Ravenshade, the firstborn, charming, brilliant, cruel in ways that were easy to forgive because he wore them so well. The family adored him. Society adored him. I admired him. He paused, his jaw tightening as old memories rose like ghosts from the ashes. But beneath that golden charm was something rotten. He gambled, he lied, and he used people as if they were coins in his pocket. And when father discovered the debts, the affairs, the blackmail, he cast him out. Elara listened, her hands clasped together, her pulse quickening with every word. 2 years later, Sebastian continued. We heard he'd been found in France, dead, shot in a duel over a merchant's daughter. I identified the body myself. It was burned, but the ring was his. I buried him with my own hands. The Duke's eyes flickered with a pain Elara had never seen before. And yet, that letter bears his mark. The raven and the dagger. He used it once before, as a warning to me. She stepped closer, her voice soft but trembling. What did he warn you about? Sebastian's gaze met hers, sharp, haunted. He warned me that if I ever took what he believed was his, he would make me regret it. The air in the room thickened, pressing against them like a storm waiting to break. Elara swallowed hard. And what did you take? Everything, he whispered. The title, the estate, the Ravenshade name. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, deep, ominous, as if the heavens had heard the confession. For the rest of that night, neither of them spoke. The fire burned low, the clock ticked endlessly, and the world beyond their walls felt colder than ever before. The next morning, a carriage arrived at their door, black and unmarked. The footman carried a parcel wrapped in rough cloth. When opened, it revealed an old pocket watch, one Elara had never seen before. The Duke stared at it for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned it over. Etched on the back were the initials, A.R. Alistair Ravenshade, and beneath them, a single phrase carved into the metal. The dead remember what the living forget. Elara felt her blood run cold. He's alive. The Duke nodded slowly. And he's coming for everything I have left. Later that day, as the two sat by the window, the city outside oblivious to their turmoil, Elara spoke what they were both thinking, but hadn't dared to say aloud. If he wants revenge, Sebastian, he'll use what matters most to you. He turned his gaze toward her, his eyes dark and determined. Then, he will find me ready. But as the shadows lengthened, and the rain began again, neither could ignore the truth, neither dared speak, that revenge was not the only thing Alistair Ravenshade wanted. He wanted her, because years ago, before tragedy and exile, Alistair Ravenshade had once been betrothed to Lady Elara Whitmore. Elara could not move. The world tilted beneath her as Sebastian's words settled like ice in her chest. Betrothed to Alistair Ravenshade, the name, once a faint echo of the past, now returned with the full weight of memory. She could almost see his face again, the charming smile that hid too much, the glint of danger in his eyes, the smooth voice that could twist truth into music. But she had buried that memory long ago, and now it had clawed its way back from the grave. She turned slowly toward the Duke, her voice trembling. "Sebastian, you didn't know." He shook his head, the muscles in his jaw tight. "Not until now. You never spoke of him, and I never asked. When we met, I only knew you had once been engaged to a man who died abroad. I never imagined that it was your brother," she finished softly. Silence stretched between them, heavy, suffocating. The wind outside moaned against the windows, as if echoing the weight of their shared history. "I was 16, Elara said finally, her voice distant. "It wasn't love, not truly. My father arranged it. Alistair was magnetic, dangerous, the kind of man who made you feel seen and unseen all at once. I thought he adored me. But he only adored what I represented. A name, a dowry, a future he could manipulate." Her hands tightened around the edge of the chair. "The night before we were to be married, he vanished, left me humiliated, ruined in the eyes of society. My father never recovered from the disgrace. That's when I swore off marriage forever." Sebastian's throat tightened as she spoke, every word slicing him open. "And now he's back," he whispered, "to destroy what little peace you've rebuilt." She met his eyes, wide, filled with fear she could not hide. "Sebastian, if he's truly alive, then he won't stop." He never did. That night, the storm broke again. Rain hammered the city as though the sky itself were furious. The Duke ordered guards stationed outside the townhouse, and his solicitor was summoned to arrange legal protections. But Elara knew, men like Alistair didn't fight with lawyers or swords. They fought with secrets. And before dawn, the first blow came. A messenger arrived, pale, shaking, holding a small wooden box. No name, no address, only a single black ribbon tied around it. Inside lay a folded piece of parchment, and something far worse, a delicate gold locket Elara hadn't seen in years. She recognized it instantly. It had been her betrothal gift from Alistair, engraved with the words, "To my future Duchess." Her hands trembled as she opened the letter. "My dear Elara, you see you found my brother quite comforting in my absence. How touching. But you were mine once, and some debts remain unpaid. You wear his protection now. But tell me, does he know the secret you kept from me? The one you hid before you ran? Don't worry, I'll remind you soon enough." The Duke read the letter twice, his expression turning from confusion to fury. "What secret?" he demanded, his voice sharp, raw. Elara turned pale. "Sebastian, please." He took a step closer. "What did he mean, Elara? What did you hide from him?" She looked away, her eyes glistening. "Something I never meant to hide from you." Her voice broke as she whispered, "The child, Sebastian, the child that never lived." The words hung in the air like a curse. He froze, breath caught, heart hammering. "You were with child." She nodded, her voice trembling. "After he fled, I never told anyone. The shame would have destroyed my family. The sickness took it from me before it ever had a chance to live. I thought that part of me had died with it." Tears filled her eyes as she met his. "That's why I can't bear another. That's why I told you I could never give you an heir." The Duke's anger melted into anguish. He reached for her, but she stepped back, shaking. "He'll use it," she said. "He'll turn my past into a weapon against you, against us." Sebastian's voice was low, dangerous. "Then let him come. Let him crawl out of whatever pit he's been hiding in. I will not lose you to his cruelty again." But deep down, Ilara knew Alistair didn't just want revenge. He wanted her heart shattered, her name ruined, her soul broken. And somewhere in the shadows of London, Alistair Ravenshade smiled as the rain fell against the glass of his rented carriage. He whispered to the darkness, "If my brother took my title, I'll take his heart, and I'll start with her." The night was heavy, yet somehow silent. The kind of silence that trembles before a storm. In the Duke's chamber, a single candle burned low, its flame flickering against the sharp lines of his face. His eyes were red, whether from sleepless nights or unshed tears, no one could tell. Across the hall, in the room once filled with the scent of roses and warmth of soft laughter, Eleanor stood by the window, watching the moonlight spill over the cold grounds of Ashbourne. She clutched the small embroidered handkerchief he had given her years ago, her only proof that what they had was once real. The letter had arrived that morning, a request from the Duchess's father, demanding her return home for her health. The Duke had read it in silence, then sealed it with wax, allowing her to go. He didn't stop her. He didn't say a word, but his heart screamed every word he could not bring himself to speak. That evening, as the carriage was prepared, Eleanor descended the grand staircase in a soft gray gown. No jewels, no lace, just the simplicity of a woman who had loved and lost. The servant stood still, the air thick with sorrow. When she reached the door, she found him waiting there. The Duke of Ashbourne, once the embodiment of pride and power, now looked nothing more than a man stripped bare of everything except grief. "You're leaving," he said, his voice low, controlled. "I must," she replied, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "You deserve an heir. I cannot give you that." He took a step closer, his jaw tightening. "Do you think that's all I ever wanted from you?" She lowered her eyes. "It's what you should want. It's what your name demands." A bitter laugh escaped his lips. "And what of my heart, Eleanor? Does that demand nothing?" Tears welled in her eyes. But she held firm. "Your heart deserves a legacy. Mine only carries silence." He moved then, one slow, painful step at a time, until he stood close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath. His hand lifted, trembling slightly, before cupping her cheek. "If you cannot give me an heir," he whispered, "then give me peace. Stay, and give me peace." Her breath hitched. "Peace." He nodded, eyes shining in the dim light. "I have fought battles, won titles, and conquered lands, but none of it has given me peace. Only you ever did." The tears broke free now, streaming silently down her face. "I am broken, Edward," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You deserve more than what I have left. And yet," he said softly, "it is only your brokenness that makes you real. And I," his voice faltered, "I am tired of living a life made of perfection and lies." The carriage waited outside. The driver glanced toward the door, then back to his reins, but no one came. Inside, the Duke pulled her gently into his arms, holding her as if the world could collapse, and he would still refuse to let her go. For a moment, time stopped. The whisper of silk, the tremor of breath, the scent of lavender and tears. It was as if the universe held its breath for them. And then she spoke, voice trembling against his chest. "Then you shall have peace, my lord. As long as I live, you shall have peace." The candle flickered once, twice, and went out. Outside, dawn began to rise over Ashbourne. And within its ancient walls, a new chapter began. Not of heirs and legacies, but of two souls choosing quiet love over the weight of duty.